I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Katie Prentiss, who is a filmmaker and an actress. She wrote and directed her first short film, Front Porches, and is now on her way to making her first feature film, Wake Up Maggie. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me, Tammy.
Well, I'm really excited to dive into launching a second act in Midlife. I think that's something that is funny for the times. We're seeing more and more actresses and actors that are older playing these significant roles, and it's just so nice to know that it doesn't matter if you get older, there's still opportunities out there for you.
I know one of the things that attracted me when I first started thinking about pivoting in my life to acting and filmmaking, I was like, oh, I could do this until I die. What a fun adventure that we can create stories and act as characters until forever. So good.
Exactly. So that kind of leads me to my first question. You were a portrait photographer. Your mom got diagnosed with dementia, which I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
That's really tough.
Yeah.
I was just curious, how did that experience shape your decision to pursue acting and go from, portrait photographer to acting? Did you always want to act, or life is short?
Yes and yes. I mean, I think that acting always intrigued me, but it was more from the periphery. Like, I don't think that I thought about it as a viable option for my life because it felt so far removed from my day-to-day. However, I started seeing productions in town and hearing about friends being background actors on set, and I was like so curious, like, how do you get to be on set? Like, that sounds like so much fun. And I'm so curious. I just want to see how it all works. This was the first time I ever acted was 2 years after losing my mom to frontotemporal dementia. It's a lesser known type of dementia that she had. And obviously, grief and going through something really difficult like that does give us different reflection and hopefully clarity on our life. How do we want to live? Am I living? Am I choosing the things I want to be doing right now? And life is short. You do feel that in such a visceral way that I leaned into doing things that scared me. I leaned into letting go of people pleasing and worrying about what people would think. And, if you really want to get over that, go ahead and try to act, because it's a very public art form and people will project their fears on you like left and right about that. So anyway, I do think that my experience walking my mom to the end of her life and my journey as a portrait photographer, I've been thinking about this a lot, like how sometimes life takes you where you're meant to go, whether it's a surprise to you or not. It just feels like it was always leading up to that. And I think about that as my own life. I look back and, it can look like to me and others that acting and filmmaking is from left field. But I think, oh, no. I've been a storyteller and a lover of people my entire life. So this is the natural chapter that I'm in.
Yeah, I was just thinking of a couple of things when you were talking. One is that there does hit a point at a certain age you start to go, ooh, I got to think of the rest of my life. I know when you're younger, you think you're never going to get old.
Yes.
You're never going to hit there. You don't even think about that. And then you start to hit a point where you lose your parents, and then you go, wow. I don't know how much time I have left, and if it's now or never. If I want to do it, I got to do it now. So it's really great that you, through this experience, really recognize, like, I need to do what I want to do, or at least try.
I love that truth of what I think midlife can offer us is a deeper reflection on where we've been, where we are, and where we want to go. I remember in college having one of my English professors in college shared this with us one day, and it stuck in my mind. He was talking about how you think of your life in blocks of 20 years often, like the first 20 years of your childhood. And when you're 20, you're like, oh, like, then that you think about how much you have so much time. You like think, oh, I can do whatever I want. Like that'll come later. He was, I think, 50 when he was sharing this, or in his 50s. And he was like, I'm at the stage in my life where I'm like, it's more like the next 10 years, and then you're looking ahead thinking, well, maybe it's 5 or maybe it's 1 year at a time. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think losing people you love, my mom, and I also had a couple of dear college friends. I lost them to cancer in COVID years, or the pandemic, I should say. We're still in COVID years. And yeah, I think all of it just impacts you of like, how do I want to live? And yeah, I think I knew from that I want my life to expand. And what I mean by that is I want to live and love as big as I can until I die.
Yeah, and and that's really great because as you were just mentioning about your friends, it's like I think when you start to get into your 40s, that's when you start to lose people.
Yeah.
Maybe 30s too, and then you start to go, wow, that person was like, I've had friends in high school die too, and it's like they were 45. And I always do it this way: is I go, God, that would be me if I died like 2 years ago, or that would be me if I died in 3 years. Like, could you imagine thinking, I have 3 more years to live?
Yeah.
Or I don't know it, but 3 more years and I'm going to be dead.
Yes.
It's just surreal. And I think you get to a point where you really have to reevaluate your life and decide. And the good news is that at any point you can start your life. And I think sometimes, and I know for me that as I'm getting older, I'm just like, oh God, is this done? Or, and I'm always looking at other people and going, okay, how old is that? And, how do you stay healthy? And I think, like you were saying, the 20-year spans, I think they're wake-up calls to you.
Yeah.
They're also wake-up calls. So, like, at 20, it might be just well, I don't know about 20, but 30 for sure. 30 and then on up, every 10 years, it's kind of like this is your next chance to get healthy, to change habits. Because I think when you're in your 20s, especially if you're, partying a lot or something, you never think about the consequences of that later. And then as you get older, you're either having wake-up calls to health or whatever. So I think that you always have opportunities to change. And I love, like on Instagram, I see reels of a 94-year-old doing deadlifts. And then I'm like, okay, well then I guess at any age you can change.
Yes. I love that you say wake up call, because that's how it feels to me. And it makes me happy just because of my film, Wake Up Maggie. I'm like, yes, let's talk about wake up calls. But I think I think you're exactly right. When you lose someone or watch someone suffer with something, it feels just so natural to either fear that you're going to go through that exact same process or compare your lifeline with that same timeline. I know for me, my mom's dementia included primary progressive aphasia, so she lost her ability to speak. This was pretty close to her diagnosis at 62. She was already communicating less and less at this point. So I very much look at my own life and think, what if I lost my ability to use my voice? Okay, I want to use it now. I want to do whatever I can now, right? So it's that wake up call that we can move into action. And I think the general biology, like the way we're created as human beings and animal creatures, is to, as we age, seek more and more comfort. And that's like this natural protective. It's actually not a bad thing. It's like what you're saying, like we're 20s, we're risk adverse, our frontal lobes are not developed. We're going to do all sorts of life-threatening things and hope we'll survive and think we're invincible. And then you sustain enough injuries or enough loss or grief in life, and you start becoming like more careful. And that careful can cause us to live smaller and choose more comfort in life. But for me, I want to be intentional about leaning into safe risks, risks that aren't really risks, like acting or filmmaking. That's not going to do any damage in my life,
Right.
but it feels like a risk. So I really want to lean into those things and explore and not allow myself to get smaller and smaller because of fear or grief or the very real things that we've experienced as humans.
Right. Yes. Well, let's dive into Front Porch.
Sure.
Because Front Porches.
Sure.
I was wondering, was that a play on the frontal lobe?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Thank you for noticing
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Not everyone
Yeah.
has picked up on that, but I love that you got it. Yes.
Yeah. Because I was like, because I'm learning about dementia through my mother. And then I was like, I bet that. And so I looked it up and I was like, yep, I'm wondering. I was curious.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
let's dive into that role. And what were your thoughts about, okay, I'm going to write this story, your experience with what happened to your mother. So what made you decide to make it a neighbor?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for asking that. There are a couple of things. One is I didn't want it to be exactly my story.
Okay.
Two is that we were filming in 2020. So it was right in the middle of the pandemic when we were all shut in, and you started to evaluate, what are my relationships with my neighbors like? How do we connect as human beings? And it's easy, I think, with social media and all the things that we have access to now to become more private and more insular in our homes. And I think the pandemic taught us that we can rely on each other. And so I really wanted to set that story in a neighbor relationship because of that. I also, yes, the Front Porches is like, oh, it's like the front of our brain. Like, I love that connection. But I also was thinking about the way homes are designed now versus the way they used to be. Is like so many homes are, the public facing is very private. They have, people go into their garage and shut their garage door, and then they go in the backyard, the back porches and the privacy fences, and they recreate public parks in their backyard and all of that. And I was thinking about, we live in a really old home in Portland, Oregon, and there's front porches all over Portland, Oregon in these old homes. And I love that because I feel like it invites interaction in the neighborhood. It invites interaction with neighbors when you're sitting on your front porch as opposed to your back porch. So Front Porches is that. And yeah, I just wanted to share, a story. Both Barb and Maggie in that film experience a lot of personal neglect in their lives, partially self-induced, partially from their families. And I wanted to explore how chosen family can exist in some of our lives where we maybe don't get the nurture we need from our personal families, but we can find those relationships and friendships in life that feel like reparenting ourselves, or like that connection, that bond of a mother-daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, you were so kind to her. I mean, I don't know. I don't always see that around sometimes, where we don't even know our neighbors.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a Southern California thing. I don't know. Or for me, it's like I feel like even with the neighbors that I've had, even if I try to make connections, it seems like we're just passing ships.
Totally.
How long did it take you to write the script and discover the story? I mean, did you have the story in your mind for a while, or did you just, like, how do you write? Do you just flood it all out, or does it take time? Do you bounce things off people?
Are we talking about Wake Up Maggie, my feature film?
I want to
Front
talk about
Porches?
Front Porches first, and then I'm going to dive into to Wake Up.
Front Porches, I'm trying to remember how long it took me to write it. I will say I really didn't know anything about filmmaking. I wanted to explore it, and I tend to dive into things and see, like, I'm just going to try it and learn on the fly is how I learn more. I'm not like, I'd rather just go for it and like feel it out than research it to death. So I remember writing this on a Google Doc. It was not formatted at all. It was pretty bad. But I shared it with a couple of people, and they were like, I think you have a really a story here. So then, moving through that process, I would say I probably spent a year writing it, learning that process of writing a script, and thankfully having friends who would review it with me and help make some edits and changes. So then we greenlit it. I think we decided to shoot it. I feel like it was August of that year, and then we shot in October of 2020, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the story and with your relationship to your husband, I see that, and it's like it was so believable. Like, oh God, sometimes I think husbands they can be a little bit more emotionally detached, or they don't think about that, like, oh, just live your own life. What are you worrying about her? She's not your mother, kind of thing. So I could feel the pain of your character really wanting, like, knowing something's wrong. The son is, again, I don't know. Do you think that that's just a male perspective? Is that a lot of time? Because I see with, one of my brothers is that way too. He just, does not get that my mom is changing.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's hard.
It's very hard when you need support, and then you feel someone's passivity or perhaps even negativity. I think the stats are staggering about, I don't have the exact number, but how the majority of women are the caregivers.
Oh, yeah.
And I think caregiving in itself is such a invisible role, often feeling. So yeah, I was building that for Maggie and Barb in that story because I feel like it's real. It's like right when you're thinking you might expand, then you find yourself catapulted into caregiving, and that affects your life, and you need support as a caregiver. And
right, yeah, and almost dismissing too, and that's challenging. Now, so is Wake Up Maggie the feature of Front Porches?
So no, but I would say Front Porches is a proof of development is what we're calling it for Wake Up Maggie.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is the story setting and the characters that are in the story are completely changed. So it's not a continuation. It's not the same story, same context, or characters. However, a lot of the moments that are based on true stories are carried over. And the audience, the thing that I learned with Front Porches, like I never wanted to make a feature about dementia or highlighting dementia because I thought we all know where that goes. It's so depressing. Like I'll make my little short and we'll be done. I'll feel like I've given something and processed things. And however, I found that the response to Front Porches and the nerve that it touched was something I couldn't ignore. The fact that people really long to see something that makes them feel less alone and makes them feel understood in their journey of caregiving or dementia diagnosis or whatever they're processing. I thought there's more to be done here. And I feel like I can't really ignore the energy behind that. It took me a long time to figure out the story context of Wake Up Maggie and what I wanted it to really be centered in. And the biggest thing is it took me a really long time I couldn't figure out the ending because I felt like the ending, I couldn't just let it be obvious, like there's dementia and then there's decline and then we know what happens.
Right.
So when I finally got to a place where like the ending came to life for me and I knew what it was going to be, it felt like the gates just flew open. And honestly, that moment that I've written, I can't give anything away, but it is so special. And it gives me so much joy. It feels like a gift to me and all of us who have been in this journey. So anyways, Wake Up Maggie is set in the context of two sisters. Maggie is the older sister and Jane is her younger sister. And Maggie's journey is exactly what we've been talking about so far, Tammy, with the midlife unraveling, the midlife reflection, the thinking that you kind of have your life figured out. You've got it under control. Like you've got all the systems operating. And then this event or crisis happens and you have to pivot. And it's not like a super fun pivot. It's like oh my gosh, how am I going to handle this too? And so Maggie's journey is one from control to ultimately acceptance. But often we learn the hard way that way.
Right. And is this Maggie's pivot is the mother coming down with dementia, or
no?
Is it the sister?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's it's a
can't
little
tell.
bit of a
We need to
spoiler,
watch it.
but I'll say this: FTD, frontotemporal dementia, like my mom had, is the most common type of dementia under the age of 65, and it often affects people younger. So it's less known, it's less understood. It gets confused with Alzheimer's all the time. It's not a memory decline. It's a personality compulsion, like the physical. It's a degenerative disease of the frontal and temporal lobes of your brain, and so yeah, it really just shifts people's whole being in really profound ways. So Maggie's journey is going from tightly controlling her life. She's estranged from her sister, Jane, and then Jane gets in some trouble, and Maggie has to decide if she's going to answer this call to help her sister once again. And when she does, she discovers there's a lot more going on in her sister's life. So it's not a typical dementia film at all.
Okay.
I would say like it really hits the midlife unraveling is what Brene Brown calls it. And I love the midlife, not crisis, but unraveling that life just loves to do for us. And then it's really a love letter to caregivers. So it's for all of us who know what it's like to bring someone you love into your life and devote so much time and attention to their needs. And then it's also a FTD awareness piece.
I love it. And being a photographer, did that help? Is that helping you when you directed Front Porches to the composition?
Yes.
How did you want to compose your shot? So talk to me about like being a photographer and then transitioning into a filmmaker director and capturing the story and the emotions. Did the photography help that? And being a mother and a caregiver.
Yes. I mean, I think all of our life experiences help. They build and layer us into beautiful ways to help us have more depth in any career we're doing, but especially one that deals with humanity and stories and filmmaking. So yes, my photography, wow, like I've had a portrait photography business for the past 17 years. And I'd spent so much time. I'd always say, like, I want to tell your story when I'd plan shoots with people, and I would want them to tell me about them, and I'd want them to feel like as loose and natural as they could with me in front of my camera. I've been directing people in that way to obviously with photography, we lean into like happy and connectivity, and sometimes even like reflecting, like letting people be more thoughtful in their moment rather than just always posed and smiling. But I do think directing and interacting with people for all these years there in front of the camera is like a really natural step into directing on film, like talking with actors, trying to help people feel comfortable and confident while also getting from them what you need and what you know they'll want is such a nuance. So I love that. I've spent a lot of time doing that. So that's a natural thing. I do feel like I can really encourage actors and yet still try to suss out what I need. Then I think for sure, the first time I was ever on set as an actor, I was like overwhelmed, excited about the cameras and lights and as an actor who's been a photographer all the time, like I'm always like camera aware. So it's like I
Uh-huh.
understand lighting, finding my light and lenses and stuff like that too, which is a help. But yeah, being on that first set and seeing the collaboration with so many people trying to create this one story or this moment was mind-boggling and also just so exciting to me. I've always wished I could be more collaborative with people because I was still an entrepreneur with photography. So doing things as a group was so fun. And definitely, I think the thing with the interesting thing about shot lists and types of shots that I want, I've always been very exploratory and spontaneous on shoots. So I shoot almost exclusively on location and we move around and we find spots and I love it. I love exploring, like, let's get lower, let's go this way, and like changing the shot up. So the difference with filmmaking is I have to plan ahead with all of that. Um,
Right.
but I do think the visual aspect of my work as a photographer into filmmaker is super natural for me as well, because it's just already a visual person. I kind of already play with angles and shots and lighting. So moving that into filmmaking is a smooth-ish transition. It's still very, very challenging, and I still have so much to learn. But yeah, it's definitely served me that I've been a portrait photographer all these years.
Yeah, because as a portrait photographer, you have to communicate, like you were saying, to your clients on how they need to position themselves. It's not an easy task if you're not used to talking to people. It's not about just taking your camera out and going, okay, pose.
Yes,
They're looking to you to tell them
yes,
how to pose.
yes,
So you really have to be in
yes,
charge. And probably going on, on your shoots and shooting on the fly has really helped probably to go, ooh, I can see something a little differently because, you're capturing. I mean, a picture is capturing a story in a moment,
right,
telling a story in a moment, whereas a film, you're over time telling
right.
the story. So, I mean, there's something to taking that one photo that says everything.
Yes.
So I'm sure that, being a director and having, doing a little different things, having to think about coverage,
Yes,
for the
yes.
editor and everything. So where are you at with the project, Wake Up Maggie?
Oh, so excited. Okay, so I've been working on this for 2.5 years. I think that's where I am right now. But my producer that I brought on, Kara Mitsuko, has been working with me since January. We have been primarily fundraising and just getting the development pieces of the film together. And we're planning to greenlight pre-production for December and January, and then planning to shoot in February of 2025. So it's right
Oh my
around the
God.
corner.
Oh, how amazing. It's so exciting when, you think of a project, you do all the hard work to
Mm.
write it. And then when you start to build your team, I mean,
Oh,
that is so amazing. Do you have your DP yet?
we do not yet.
Oh, okay.
Definitely have people in
So all those
mind, but
DPs.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's so exciting. It's exciting to me. I'm one of those people who actually enjoys the fundraising piece, even though it's stressful, only because number one is I know this film is going to mean so much to so many people, and I really believe it's going to help with advocacy work and changing, policy and awareness for caregivers, for people diagnosed or caring for someone with dementia. But it's also, on a very personal level, going to bring a lot of hope and healing to people, like we talked about. Like when you're in this journey and you feel so like alone and excluded in your home, maybe you aren't able to do as much in your life as you'd like to because you're caregiving. it's like just letting people see themselves reflected back on screen, I think is going to do a lot of good. So fundraising for this one feels just, yeah, this feels good. This feels right. And we actually have gotten a fiscal sponsorship through a local company called Hollywood Theater. So we're even able to operate as a nonprofit and offer tax deductions on donations. So it's felt very aligned in this process of gathering. We're not just gathering funds. We're not just gathering money. We're gathering energy. We're gathering an audience. We're gathering a community that really want to see this movie get made, which just feels so cool. I cannot wait to celebrate with everyone.
Can you tell me a little bit about the fundraising? Because everybody, out there probably wants to know, how are you getting the money? Or how did you go about it? So do you mind just walking us through the process of when you started, what were your thoughts to now?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of my gifts is my brain tends to operate in a highly optimistic way. And so I think it'll all come in.
Yeah.
And then as I move forward and it goes a lot slower than I expect or less than I expect, I have to go, I was very optimistic. Okay, let's keep going. I think the number one thing I would say with fundraising is always connect back to your why. Like, why are you making this? Why are you making this? What do you care about this film yourself? Because sometimes that external validation comes, whether it's fundraising or people wanting to jump on, or sometimes it doesn't. And you have to know that you want it to be made. Fundraising, my strategy, this film, I have the advantage of it being a very personally connected story. It's very much based on my experience with my mom's dementia, my journey as her caregiver. And I think because of that, I can lean into our communities that we've had through the years, people who know my family, people who have known me in this process or not. I can lean into people who are connected to caregiving support, dementia support, that type of thing. So there's already communities that I feel like this project, we would be mutually beneficial in supporting one another. They can come on to the film. We can support their work and in raising awareness or doing good. I have done different fundraising campaigns in cities that I've lived. We've moved around the U.S. a bit. And so one of the strategies I did was to connect with friends who I know are amazing humans at gathering people. And I said, would you be interested in hosting a happy hour type fundraiser for this production? And my first yes was from my dear sister in Atlanta, Georgia,
All right.
who also caregived for my mom and knows this journey so well. And then I had a dear high school friend in Columbus, Georgia, where I went to high school, who also hosted an event. Then I had a friend in San Jose, California, who hosted an event. And we've done a couple different things in Portland, and we're about to have another one. Those have been so amazing for just being able to share this process, this progress, to like build into community, to like raise energy as well as money. I just feel like creating our community around Wake Up Maggie, because then I think, well, not only are we gathering funds here, but we're going to hopefully host screenings in these places as well. So that's been one strategy that I've employed. I think going the fiscal sponsor route is an option for people that, most filmmakers for features do investors and, offer a return on investment. We felt that our film really aligned with more of a cause, like a nonprofit cause. So we felt like that would be a really good route for us to do fiscal sponsorship. We're really proud of that relationship we have as well. We've applied for every grant we could find that aligns with our film. We were awarded one grant in Portland. It's called the RAC grant, and I'm trying to think of the acronym. Regional Arts Creative Council. I may be getting that wrong, so you might want to edit that. I don't know. But anyways, we're proud of that grant as well. So yeah, it's just trying to cast the net wide and then ask people, do you know anyone who's interested in this issue and a film that would raise awareness on this issue? You know, we have a few people that have hopped on as producers, so that's always like deeply encouraging when people want to donate a lump sum to make this production happen. So those are some of my strategies, but I don't know that it's that different from what everyone else is trying. It's a long journey.
No, I think it's always challenging to get the money and not have it coming out of your pocket.
Yeah.
So far, what have been the biggest lessons you've learned? Also the challenges.
Yeah.
Like, I know funding, like, you're optimistic. You think, oh, yes, it's all going to come in, and then it's slowly So what are the things that you're learning?
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be great once you've completed the film, then we can talk about the challenges of filmmaking. But what are the things you've learned so far in your process of acting and getting you to your first feature film? I mean, you're directing it,
I'm
right?
co-directing.
Co-directing your first feature film. Now, you've been an actor in other films, but in particular with this, what have you learned through all your experiences?
Wow. And so much. Like I said, I learn by trying. And so that means mistakes are made. You know, you're exposed in your lack of knowledge anytime you're trying something new. Oh, where to start? I've learned so much. One is I look for what I call F-yes energy. I'm looking, I think,
I like that.
Like learning to recognize people's energy with your project. And when I believe so much in my project and I'm giving so much of my heart, soul, and time to this thing, I really want people, especially in the early stages, who want to jump on because it means so much to them as well. And that has been phenomenal when that is aligned. Just the camaraderie and connection you can feel over working on the project together is so good. And the thing that happens when people are very aligned in their energy is that when things are hard or when the questions come up, we all can go to our reasons of why are we here. And I would say that's very true of my producer. She has such a deep personal connection and story to caregiving and seeing the decline in someone she loves. And so for her, like when time gets tough and you're not sure if you're going to get the money and you're not sure where the project is going to go, you can come back to that. Even if I just give this to someone I love because I know it'll affect them so much, then I've succeeded. So I think learning that, like the deeper level of what defining success is for you, I've learned a lot about. My new lesson that I've been thinking a lot about this week is external validation versus internal validation. It's kind of along those same lines. When things have gotten really exciting with Wake Up Maggie, the amount of support, the amount of people that have said, oh my gosh, yes, I'm so excited about this project, or this has to get made. How are we going to make your film? When people say we, when they're talking about your film, you're like, I love you.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
And all of that external validation feels so good, and it can be energy and it can really keep you going and motivated. But then it always like dies out and dips down. And what are you going to do in that moment? And so just learning again, like to be able to go back to your internal validation. This is a movie I love. This is a movie I want to see. This is a movie that I know will change some people's lives. And going back to that is going to center you and like stabilize you rather than like looking for other people to like stabilize you and move you along. We always, I think filmmakers, actors, probably everybody in the world looks for somebody else to open the door for them and roll out the carpet for them. And everybody's waiting. They think some producer's going to knock on their door and say like, here's $1 million. We want to make your film. And like everyone is waiting for that. Nobody fully knows what they're doing. Everyone's figuring it out. Everyone's making it up. So there's no reason why you can't. But you cannot wait for somebody else to give you permission. You cannot wait for somebody else to like say, oh, you're so great. You've just been sitting in your house this whole time, and I've been looking for you my whole life, and now let me serve you with all of my energy and money. Wouldn't that be amazing? But it's
Right.
not happening.
Yes.
I think the other thing I've learned, I'll say a huge lesson in general in my filmmaking journey, because I have an entrepreneur background and because I've worked for myself for so long, I am the person who is like, okay, I have to figure this out and I'm going to do it. And I tend to be very self-reliant. And so
Mm-hmm.
learning how to ask for help, let people help you, and also like find the right people to help you is such a huge lesson for me. Knowing what I'm not good at, knowing what I am good at, and how to find people who have the opposite skill set is amazing. My producer says she loves charts and data and information, and I'm like, what? That's amazing. And I'm like, I run from that stuff. I don't want to make a Google sheet about anything, So it's like I do it. I mean, obviously I'm going to organize myself, but to have somebody else who actually enjoys that, what a gift. Like we're both in our right space, So those are some of
Yeah.
the biggest lessons, I think, just finding the team and relying on people who are better than you at things. And are
Right.
strong in your weakness and vice versa. So beautiful.
Yeah. And I think sometimes like we think what we don't know is a failure or if we make mistakes, but it's like, but that's how you learn,
Yes.
It's like the only way you're going to learn you're never going to be perfect. And the only way you're going to learn is by failing and I don't even think it's
No.
failing. It's just like, oh, that didn't work. What would I do next time?
Exactly. And I definitely have all of those just like really practical things like, oh, I needed better sound or better coloring or better whatever. Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't need to film all that coverage. Like I think the first film I made, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I should have filmed more coverage. And then the next films I like filmed so much coverage and someone was like, oh, you're actually letting the editor choose then if you film all this coverage. So now I'm like really wanting to be intentional about like what do I actually need, plan it out, put it together. You don't have to waste time. It's always that fine line of like time and money, right? Like
Right.
you always
Yeah.
think you need more time and more money, but I don't necessarily believe that more is actually a gift. I think sometimes just knowing what you actually need to get the job done is where it's like so perfect, especially in filmmaking. If you're trying to, the more money you spend, if you're trying to make it back, the more challenging that becomes.
Well, yeah, and you want to stay on budget too.
Mhm.
And time is the essence.
Yes.
But I think time is relative.
Mhm.
And I think that, the more that you plan, the more you're focused is great. And also talk to your editor before you start shooting. Try to have an editor before you start
Yes.
shooting because they can also help you too with coverage as well. Because, what people don't always think about, for the editor is when something's not working, especially continuity. I see this a lot where it's like one person has a hand on a desk in the wide shot and then in the next wide shot, it's this way. And it's like, okay, how am I supposed to, like now I have to get creative in the cutting
Totally.
because now it's off
Totally.
to try to keep consistent. But yeah, I mean, and I think that that's helping. I mean, really, it's about communicating. You have to have a strong relationship with your DP because your DP is the eyes for you. And they're going to be thinking about things that maybe you're not thinking
Totally.
about if you get a really good one.
Mhm.
So I think it's all about collaboration,
Yeah.
relationships, and finding the right synergy
Yes.
between them because you want somebody who's going to work with you, not resist against you.
Yes.
And I've seen that on set too, where a DP is resisting against the director. And it's like, dude.
Totally. And it's funny
Sorry.
you said dude because
I
a
know.
little honest slip there. But I think that I think so much of it is about like ego on set or ego in this world. And I'm like, I don't have
Yeah.
time for that. I do not have time for ego. Like we all have ego, but I'm just saying
Right,
if
yeah.
you're in this for your own gain only, then like it's probably not going to work. And I think the most beautiful part of filmmaking to me is it just still like makes me go it's just I have like two metaphors. One is like a canvas where I'm like I'm like got this huge canvas and I maybe like pencil out like the illustration of what I want it to be. And then all of the cast and crew get to like paint it and like color it and shape it. And it's like mind blowing, like how it all comes together the same. I think about like wet clay in the same way. It's like maybe I've got the clay on the wheel, but everyone's hands take a turn in shaping it to what it's going to be before it's fired and finished. That's so beautiful. Like all of our fingerprints are on this canvas or this clay. And yeah, like I wrote the script and it's, feels very much like my story in so many ways. And I'll always feel that ownership for it. However, having those fingerprints on it makes it so much better, makes it so much more vibrant and alive. And oh, I just love it. I love it so much.
No, I think that is so great when a director can be open to other people's inputs. I worked on a film where I co-directed with another person. We were doing a comedy. And it's like, as we were shooting it, some of the crew was going, it might be funny if they, walk by the sign or something. And it was like, I just felt so great that, hey, we're all trying to make this better. And even our DP, there was like nothing over on the side. He goes, wait a minute, we need to art design this side because it's kind of boring. It's just a white wall. He took the time and he put together the crafty table over there. So when we shot, it looked really good. But that's the team you want to be on. You want to be on a team where everybody wants the best of the project.
Right. Yes. And we take care of each other and support one another. And it's always that like fine line of when to say like, let's add this in or not. But yeah, I always think like we can't know what we don't know and we can't see what we don't see. And so we all come to set or whatever job we do with like limited view of how things work or how things should go. And like seeing other people's perspective and hearing what people think of that you hadn't thought of can be like, oh, it can change it so much for the good,
Yeah. It is timing.
It is.
I get that. It's you're stressed. You don't want everybody chiming in, hey, you should do this or you should do that. I mean, that would be very chaotic. So I'm not saying do that.
Yes.
But I think there's a time. There's a time and a place. And sometimes I think it's just like there's something coming up that says I should say something,
Yeah.
And then there's times where it's like, well, it's not my rodeo, so maybe I just keep it quiet.
Well, and exactly. And I think you're talking about your primary team as well. It's like when you're talking from director to DP to, first AD to top producer.
Yes.
It's like, like for sure, like say something if you like see something missing or something that could be added. It's so huge. Or like some sort of creative idea. It's like the same thing as like allowing an actor to improv something in a moment can give you this most beautiful thing that you had never planned and you didn't even know existed until that creative person was able to breathe life into it.
Yeah, and I would just on that, like the actor-director rule, where it's like they can add something or maybe give you some input. Like, God, I just don't. I'm struggling. I just wouldn't say it this way. Do you mind if I tweak it a little bit? I love improv because I always think, well, especially with comedies, because sometimes they add such gems that I'm just the canvas. I just wrote like an outline, but please fill it up with some stuff that maybe I wouldn't have thought of. And I love that because then it just makes the project, I don't know, I guess I feel like as a director, how do you feel, is like where you just go, wow, I've got this wonderful team that's just making this film even better than I conceived it to be.
100%. And I think about that when I'm coaching actors. I'm like, I try to say like every time you perform, it should be different because every moment we exist in is different. Nothing is repeated. And so like, yes, on improv, but even like allowing the truth of whatever moment we're in to exist. And I think that to me is what improv is like reacting to the moment we're in. It's like having a natural, true reaction, response, and riffing and playing off of each other. Like riffing off of each other is like if some person says something new, then you say something new, or you don't say anything at all, or whatever feels honest in that moment. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing. I mean, on film, we obviously capture it and freeze it, photos and film. But any live performance is unrepeatable, which is like so cool.
Yes. No, I think that's so just so exciting. I'm so excited for you about your film, I can't wait to hear about the progress of it. So for those considering a career shift or launching their second act, what advice would you give them?
Well, maybe this is cliche, but I really believe you're never too late and never too old. I think that phrase is important. And again, like it's believing that if you believe you're too late or too old, you're believing somebody else's journey is yours. And that's not true. Like we're all on our own path. So, I mean, who doesn't love a good pivot? To be honest, it's so fun to watch. It's like always in the stories we write, right? The stories we film all have like these pivots, these moments that change us and affect us. And when you just think there's no more hope, all of a sudden there's hope. I think that thing I see is so many of us long for something more or dream about something different, and we stop ourselves. And I would ask yourself the question, why are you stopping yourself? What is the reason? Sometimes there's practical limitations, and I don't want to, reduce those and say that they're smaller than they are, because we do have to make a living somehow. So if you're trying to pivot careers, it can be staggering. Like, do I go back to school? How do I financially do that? But I think that if you really want something, you'll find a way. And there's that difference between wishing for something versus really wanting something. And I think it's really easy to wish and like dream and fantasize, but it's different to want it and to actually take action steps toward it. But again, the last thing I'll say about that with the pivot is there's really no risk. There's no risk in trying. If one of the reasons you're stopping yourself is just for people, worrying about what people think is what mine would be, it's like, okay, that's like the last thing. We're all on this tiny floating marble and our life is finite. Like, who's going to really care when it's all said and done what happens if you take a risk? So yeah, I don't know. Just explore and ask yourself why you're stopping. And I do think, there's a book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield that he talks a lot about when we're called to do something, the natural thing that will happen is we'll find true resistance. And I think that resistance can make us stop. But if you know that there's like this force trying to make you stop, maybe you push through. And again, like just reflect, ask yourself why do I want this thing? Why am I stopping myself? And how can I get over that hurdle of resistance?
I love it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh my gosh.
This was great.
Thank you for having me, Tammy. I'm really excited to meet you and to connect with the other filmmakers in your audience. I love filmmakers. I think we're really wonderful people, not to be like self-congratulatory, but just to, it's like such a good bunch because it's not for the faint of heart, this industry. And so it's people that I know have a lot of grit and resilience and stuff, and I love that.
Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to get out there and make a film. Reach out to your local filmmakers group to get involved and connect. Please subscribe to the show if you like it, and follow me on Instagram @Tammy Magaro. Until we meet again, what's your story?